Now let's go through and talk about the agenda for today's webinar. What we're going to talk about is some of the highlights, and as you might expect, one of the big things this year was the Affordable Care Act. I have the distinct pleasure, if I can use that word, of trying to recap the session on affordable care. If I talk half as fast as the people who were presenting, you won't be able to follow me, and it was very interesting but incredible what we learned in the opening 2 hours. We'll then talk about some of the keynote sessions, and particularly Barry Ason's talk about the opportunities in the evolving ecosystem that is the staffing industry. We're going to take a look at some of the other keynote speakers. They had some, as usual, phenomenal nationally known keynotes, and we'll present the highlights of their sessions. And then we'll talk a little bit about the various sessions that we were lucky enough to get to attend. And finally, we'll wrap things up with some of the lessons that we learned at this year's Exec Forum. Now, I don't usually start off lunch with Haley's by apologizing to people, but I've got to apologize to everybody today because this was far and away the biggest, the best executive forum I've ever been to, and the amount of information to take in was simply overwhelming. Really phenomenal stuff. There were almost 1,000 people in attendance. Staffing industry analysts outdid themselves, and so while we're going to give you our best attempt at recapping some of these sessions, you may want to go to Staffing Industry Analysts website and see if you can pick up the audio recordings from some of these sessions, because I think it's very worthwhile. And if you've never been to an executive forum before, make plans to go to the forum in San Diego next year. So that said, apologies ended. Let's jump right in and talk about the lighthearted subject of healthcare reform. There was a 2-hour session to kick off the exec forum about implementing the Affordable Care Act in your staffing business. And I'm going to forewarn you, this is the one where I just mentioned the speakers. There were 2 speakers who went at about 10,000 miles an hour. It was very difficult to follow everything they were putting on the screen, but some of the highlights that I took away from the session. In 2014 is now not very far away, and we've talked to a lot of our clients who simply are not yet prepared. Now is the time you must absolutely get prepared, and I'm going to share with you a resource in a little bit that the American Staffing Association just came out with that if you're a member you're going to want to check out, because it's to help you figure out the likely impact of healthcare reform. And the big question is pay or play. That's what the mandates say. It's either you're going to get involved in providing health care coverage to your employees, or you're going to pay a fine. Some of the highlights of the pay or play. It affects every business with 50 or more full-time employees. So virtually every staffing company and most of your clients are going to be impacted by healthcare reform. In calculating a full-time employee, it's not just the number of bodies, it's based on the total number of hours people are working divided by 120 to figure out the full-time equivalents. So you may have a lot of people who aren't working that many hours, but collectively they may add up to more than 50 full-time employees, in which case you must offer health insurance to at least 95% of your workforce. If you don't, you'll be found in violation and you will have to pay fines. A lot of staffing companies have been talking about ways to split their business into pieces, maybe by division, or maybe the husband and wife own different pieces of the business, or franchising organizations. Well, the government's already wise to that strategy and has said we're not going to let companies split themselves up to avoid paying insurance. What really surprised me is both presenters said that for most of the companies they've consulted with, the play option was cheaper than the pay option. That $2,000 per employee fine was going to be a bigger expense than actually providing health care insurance. And that was a surprise to me, and that's why it's so important that you go do an estimated calculation for your business now so you can start planning for next year. In terms of the insurance, one of the things that I didn't know was that insurance coverage only has to cover 60% of actuarial value, or 60% of what an employee is likely to spend on health care in a year. And that's a pretty low threshold, and it makes the insurance fairly affordable at 60% coverage. The flip side of that is what you are charging people cannot be more than 9.5% of an employee's income. Otherwise, your plan is too expensive. And if it's too expensive, you're subject to fines. So I'm not going to get more into the math. This is where you need to talk to probably your CPA firm and maybe your attorneys to find exactly where you fit. You also may want to look at some of the staffing industry medical providers. I know Assurance has been doing a phenomenal job of tracking ACA, and they are working on products that the staffing industry can offer. Now, in determining if someone is a full-time employee, there's something that many of you may be aware of called a look-back rule, which is I can look back in time to see how many hours somebody worked to see if they're a full-time employee. Now, anybody who works more than 30 hours on average is considered a full-time employee, and you can look back up to 12 months. So 12 months times 30 hours a week comes out to 1,560 hours a year. If somebody worked less than that for you, they're not a full-time employee. If they worked more, they are. What's great about that is it means that a large percentage of most staffing firms' workforce, with the exception of long-term contract staffing in IT and engineering, but a large percentage of the staffing industry are not going to be considered full-time employees and not therefore subject to insurance coverage. And when you bring on a new employee, you don't necessarily owe them insurance day one. If they are considered a variable hour worker, meaning you don't know exactly when or how many hours they're going to work, they will go through a stability period before they become eligible. And that stability period can be up to a year. So a lot of temporary employees may not be eligible for insurance until 2015. Now, the government doesn't like to make anything easy, so the definition of what a variable hour worker is not clear and appears to be changing daily. And even the presenters, we were there on a Monday, they were bringing in rule changes that had happened the Friday before. So this is something to keep watching because determining who is a full-time employee is going to continue to change. One thing that the presenters mentioned that employers seem to be missing, if you're on a fiscal year, your insurance mandate doesn't start January 1st, 2014. It starts at the beginning of your fiscal year. Providing 60% coverage is actually a fairly low cost to employers because you're not covering 100% of their medical. And employers can and should look to shift plans to those plans that have a higher out-of-pocket cost. And you've got kind of this damned if you do, damned if you don't with insurance because you've got an incentive to make it fairly expensive so people don't want to participate so you don't have to pay for the insurance because there's no penalty if people opt out. But if it's more than 9.5% of people's payroll, it's too expensive. And if you don't get a large enough participation, then the insurance carriers won't give you a plan. So again, there are no easy answers here. That's why I said you need to follow the staffing industry insurance providers and in your local markets, your own attorney and accountants to get professional advice on this. That $2,000 is a penalty amount that applies to all full-time employees if you are going for the pay option as opposed to the play. And as I mentioned earlier, setting up separate companies to avoid the penalties doesn't work as a strategy to not pay insurance, but there are ways it could reduce your costs because the first 30 people are essentially free. You don't earn, in the calculations, you get the first 30 free. So very complex subject matter. I'm going to give you one last little bit of my take home, and that's not from what you need to do as a staffing company, but this is the one that probably interested me the most as a marketer. Is affordable care an opportunity for the staffing industry? And the answer appears to be yes. Jim Cramer from Mad Money went on TV and said it's going to be a boom to the staffing industry. And it's going to be a boom in helping some employees who are near that 50-person headcount avoid getting to the headcount. They'd rather send their employees to you either through payrolling services, PEO services, using temporary staffing so they don't get to the 50-person threshold. They may look at ways to keep their employees under 30 hours per week, although the government's looking at ways to prevent that from being a loophole. And then the other interesting thing is because staffing firms have so many employees that are not going to be eligible for insurance, there may be a potential cost advantage to staffing because the insurance costs you have as a staffing company, when you average them out over all of the hours your employees work, may be lower than the hourly cost for a direct employer, and that would give you a price advantage over somebody hiring their own employee. So lots of potential opportunities, and what I really took home out of this particular workshop was We all have to keep paying attention. We all have to plan ahead. The American Staffing Association on their website just Tuesday announced their new cost calculator, where you can go in and plug in numbers to determine the likely impact of the Affordable Care Act on your business. So the advice that came out of this session: maximize the rates for single coverage. Get it as close as you can to 9.5% of your wage earner's payroll. You are allowed to have reverse discrimination, so if you want to have a plan that charges less to lower paid workers to keep it affordable and more to higher paid workers, that's okay. You need to check with your insurance provider to see how you'll be impacted by minimum participation rates, and that's going to be one of the big thorns. Is you may want to offer health care coverage and no one will give it to you because such a low percent of temporary employees participate. And then check out that new cost calculator on the American Staffing Association's website. All right, so that was in 8 minutes, our take home on 2 hours of affordable care. That one alone may be worth going to Staffing Industry Analysts. It's staffingindustry.com, going to their website and checking out getting the DVDs, or excuse me, the CD audio recordings from the conference. Moving on, the big keynote presentation at every executive forum is Barry Asen, as he talks about the trends and issues going on in the staffing industry. And this year his talk was about opportunities in the evolving ecosystem of staffing. And to start the talk, he talked about where we are today. Great news. The industry's doing really well. In 2012, 3 out of 4 staffing companies saw positive growth over 2011. However, growth is slowing down. And it's kind of funny. I think Barry put his presentation right before the last jobs report came out, because he said U.S. job creation has been consistent but slow. But as you all know, we had a boom in February, so we're going to probably see this trend of it going up and down. But if you look at the GDP forecasts for the year, 2011 was about 2.4% growth. This year they're trending down to about 2.1% growth. Still positive. We're not looking at recessionary times by any stretch of the imagination, but a slowdown. And candidly, that may be really good for staffing because it keeps more uncertainty in the economy, and that drives our industry and people who use more temporary employees. The forecast for next year, or excuse me, for this current year, for the remainder of this year, is about 6% overall growth in the industry. The fastest growing segments at about 8% are going to be in IT, healthcare, and marketing and creative. So if you're looking at new ways to grow your business and you're thinking about new niche markets, those are the 3 that are looking the strongest. During the presentation, Barry also made 18 predictions for the next 5 years, and I'm not going to cover all 18, but I wanted to review some of the highlights. The U.S. staffing industry within 5 years is going to reach $160 billion, which is about 25% growth. North America will be 1/3 of the global market. Some of the biggest growth in staffing is happening in the Far East right now. IT and industrial, this one was a big surprise to me, will be up to 50% of the staffing market. Right now it's at about 43%. So if you're not in those 2 niche markets, and they're going to represent half the industry, it may be something for you to look at as saying, hey, should I be in one of these 2 segments of the staffing industry? The other thing is that top 15 firms are projected to have 50% of the worldwide market share. A lot more consolidation as giant companies buy big companies, and big companies buy middle-sized companies, and middle-sized companies buy smaller companies. What this is going to mean for everybody is you're really going to have to carve out your niche to get your slice of the pie, because the big companies are going to do what we all hate. They're going to see more commoditization because they're going to have a lot of pricing battles and efficiencies that you don't have as they go after large users of staffing. Affordable Care Act. Barry said this is going to be a boom for the staffing industry as employers either are trying to save money or simply just avoid the headaches of now managing health insurance for their workforce. And we're going to talk a little more about this in some of the breakout session, but the concept of work expanding to human cloud models. There was a lot of talk about the growth of online staffing. And online staffing is actually the fastest growing segment of the staffing industry. I think Brad's going to be talking about that in a little bit. But we're going to see more and more work expanding to ways that it can be procured over the internet, over the cloud. The concept of total talent management is something that staffing industry analysts see becoming ubiquitous, available everywhere. And that's the concept of not just providing staffing services, but really full lifestyle workforce management, where you're helping people with every aspect of hiring, management, and retention of their workforce. You're seeing the large international staffing companies have already redefined themselves as workforce solutions companies, and SIA is saying that's going to trend across the market till that is the way we sell our services, no longer just as temporary staffing and direct placement. Another prediction is that technology is going to become even more critical. Having the right ATS systems to integrate with your clients, to interact with your candidates. You're going to hear us talk about the impact of mobile in a little bit. It's going to become more and more important to have current technology and the right technology for your business to take advantage of all of the ways you can interact with clients and candidates, and you can drive more revenue growth. VMS, MSP, and RPO will become the next big things. Companies that are doing outsourced services, managing the staffing function, moving up the value chain. It's already growing very quickly, and it will continue to grow. VMS is kind of tapered off, but MSP is continuing to grow, and RPO is growing very quickly as HR departments and employers are looking for more efficient ways to manage pieces of the staffing, hiring, and human resources function. We like this one. Staffing firms are going to be the heaviest users of social media, or at least among the heaviest users of social media, because of the fact that you're doing so much to do direct recruiting, to do research on clients, and to do engagement, particularly with job seekers who are both active and passive. This shocked me. They're forecasting, and I think they were being dramatic here, the death of the branch office model, but really a downturn in companies expanding by opening up new physical locations and instead using centralized recruiting, using the internet, using the telephone, using less face-to-face to drive more revenue per salesperson, more revenue per recruiter, more revenue per organization, as opposed to the traditional model of let's just build lots of small offices. And the last prediction I want to share is the idea of micro-targeting, finding niches within niches where you can become a leading provider of very specialized staffing services, and that will be a way for lots of companies, small, medium, and large, to drive revenue growth. All right, I know we're going fast. As I said, there's a lot of content. We're trying to do 3 days in less than an hour. I've had some questions come in. I'm going to try to answer those questions via the question box as we move on and let to some of the other keynotes, and actually I've got the next one and then Brad's up. We had the privilege of hearing Billy Beane, who you may know from the book and the movie Moneyball. Did not look like Brad Pitt, sorry for the ladies who were in the audience, but had a fascinating story about his experience in professional baseball. Now, Billy Beane was the second highest rated player in the year he was drafted, right behind a guy named Darryl Strawberry. Yet you really never heard of Billy Beane in his career like you heard of Darryl Strawberry's. And the reason is Billy Beane was never very successful as a professional baseball player, despite the fact he was the second highest drafted individual. And he made a huge discovery that's relevant to staffing. And his discovery was people hire for the wrong traits. Now in baseball they used to look at things like how fast were you? How big were you? How far could you hit a ball? They wanted guys who could steal bases. And what they discovered, or Billy Beane discovered, is that winning in baseball had nothing to do with speed, size, or strength. In fact, stealing bases and like the ability to be a great sacrifice bunter actually had a negative correlation with winning a game. And what he found was that in baseball, the best predictor of winning and the best predictor of a baseball player being successful was their on-base percentage, how often they got on base versus the number of times they got up to the plate. And he used this statistic to completely change how he recruited, to find players who had skills that everybody else wasn't looking for, players he could afford to sign on a contract for a fraction of the big name guys. And those traits turned out to be the best predictors of future success. He built a highly competitive organization doing things no one else did, and it was amazing watching the Yankees payroll versus the Oakland A's payroll on the charts he showed for literally a small fraction of the cost. The take-home lessons here is that the subjective analysis that most businesses do when they hire has almost no correlation to success. And we all talk about even behavioral hiring and the importance of behavioral hiring. The trick is, are you hiring for the right traits? And can you, as a staffing firm or recruiter, get out and help your clients figure out what's their version of on-base percentage? What are going to be the things that really drive success? And to remind your clients that your eyes can fool you. The things you think you see in a person may not be true and may not be predictors of a successful hire. All right, Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can talk about uplifting service.
Thanks, David. This keynote was done by Ron Kaufman, who's a noted author and business consultant on service and building a culture of service within your organization. And he started off by explaining what good service really is. And when we think of good service, oftentimes we think about how quickly you're getting back to clients or if you're available after hours, and we deem that as good service. But he said, you know what, that might be part of good service, but good service really is doing something that provides value to somebody else. And he kept reiterating that, something that provides value to somebody else. If your service isn't offering value, it's not good service. Even though you get back to clients quickly, even though you're available after hours, you need to focus on value. And he defined 6 levels of service. And they range from criminal all the way down to unbelievable. Criminal is just, you shouldn't be in business. Your service is horrendous. And unbelievable, you've just knocked somebody's socks off. You completely overwhelmed them. You went above and beyond. And the challenge here is that these levels, or as he described them, stairs of service, continually keep changing. So if you pride yourself on having great service, but you have the same service process you did 3, 4, 5 years ago, you probably don't provide good service anymore. And that's because as you continue to provide good service and you have a good track record with clients, you're going on to the next level of service. So what was expected last year is now just basic service. What was basic service the year before is now criminal service. So you need to look at ways to continually reinvent your service process. You need to talk to your clients about what they value and build your service process around that. Continually reinvent. And how do you do that? Well, Ron offered 12 steps to do that. And I don't have a lot of time to dig into each of these, but I will go through them quickly. Number one, you need to make sure that everybody is on board with the same language. Make sure that people understand what good service in your organization really means and they use the same language. You also need to have a compelling vision. And Southwest Airlines has a vision, and it's called Wheels Up. And basically what it means is that everybody pitches in, everyone in the company pitches in to make sure that they get their plane's wheels up in the air as quick as possible. They're making more money that way, and travelers are happier that way. So they do everything from every level in that organization, everything possible to get their wheels up as quickly as possible. That's their service vision, and you need to come up with a good service vision for your company. Number 3, you need to recruit the right staff that fits your values. No matter how good a person's skills are, if they don't fit your company's values, they're not going to be a good fit for your organization. You need to spend time in orientation. The more time you spend up front in training, the better off you'll be. Make sure that every level of your communication, whether it's phone, email, social media, internal communication, make sure that that outlines and displays your service-oriented culture. Carry that compelling vision through, and make sure that you use the same language across the board. Number 6, you need to recognize and reward unbelievable service. If somebody in your organization is providing unbelievable service, make that public. Make sure that they get rewarded and noted for that. Others will follow. Number 7, again, I've touched on this a few times, but service is about providing value to your client. You need to make sure you know what they value. So talk to your customers. Understand their voice. What you think is important to them may actually not be what's really important to them. So dig down, find out what they value. Number 8, you need key measurements and metrics. For example, best of staffing metric by Innovero. Great metric to make sure you know if your clients and your candidates are happy. Number 9, you need to continually improve. As those stairs, as that escalator keeps going, you need to make sure you're on to the next level of service. Good service last week is no longer good service this week. Number 10, guarantee client happiness. And a good example of this is Zappos. They have an amazingly lenient return policy, so they virtually guarantee that every one of their clients is satisfied. Think about what you can do in your business to make sure that all of your clients are always satisfied. Number 11, gather benchmarks, both internal and external. Look at top service providers in your company, use them as a benchmark. Look at other companies that provide great service and use them as a benchmark. And to wrap it up, role-playing and modeling can be a great exercise to make sure that everyone in your company is talking the same language and providing the same high level of service. David, I believe you may still be muted here. I can't hear you coming through.
Oh, thank you, Brad. And thank you for the overview of Ron's presentation. The last keynote speaker that we saw was Jack Daly, who is a kind of legendary sales trainer and, as I learned, also triathlete. But Jack did a presentation really about how to accelerate growth in your business. And the stuff he presented was not specific to the staffing industry, but there was a lot of good fundamental take-homes. And some of the things that I want to share. Number 1, he talked about success is not about anything more complicated than doing the basic things very consistently well. The more you can simplify your business and execute on that simple set of operating procedures, the more successful you're going to be. And the foundation for creating explosive sales growth is just 3 things. Number 1, the CEO has to have a magnetic vision for the organization. Brad just talked a little bit about vision, but it's got to be compelling. It's got to begin with a destination in mind. Having a vision, every business has ups and downs, and having a vision like that is the key to getting through tough times. And it's not just the owner that needs it, but it's the employees who need that vision to give them something to focus on, to help make intelligent decisions, and to help seeing the end line, seeing the goal as they are working through the daily ups and downs of any organization's operations. Second thing, this is the Jim Collins, put the right people in the right seats in the bus. But Jack said you have to have people in key spots. And the key roles he talked about, CEO, sales manager, operations manager, and CFO or financial manager. And he talked about making sure there are key people in all 4 roles. And one of the things he mentioned, which I will repeat later, is that very often in small businesses, the CEO becomes the sales manager, and that is one of the worst things you can do. So Ryan, you may make fun of me later. Lastly, you have to create a get-to culture. And he said there are 2 reasons people come to work. They go to work because they have to, or they go to work because they get to. If you've got an organization where people go to work because they have to, you need to encourage those people to find somewhere else to work. People will do amazing things in an organization where they get to go to work. People do amazing things once you win their hearts. And if you look at companies that build exceptional cultures, the thing that stood out to me was the difference in their profitability. The difference in revenue between an average company and a high culture company was 166% growth versus 682% growth. The net income of a high-performing company was 756% higher than that of a low-performing culture. And in job growth, companies with poor cultures created 36% more jobs over, I think it was a 5-year period. Companies in strong culture organization created 282% more jobs. More jobs, more revenue, more net income come from having the right culture. So, how do you do these things? How do you create a great culture? Well, creating a great culture, Jack said there's 4 things. Number 1, having strong recognition systems. You can't have enough recognition for people's success. Whether recognition is as simple as handwritten notes to people or formal systems that reward people for their contributions, you need to have strong recognition systems at all levels. Then you need communication systems. He was recommending something as simple as a daily huddle with your key people. 15 minutes to make sure everybody's focused on the right priorities and to deal with any challenges or frustrations they're having. Making sure there is strong personal and professional development. He said people are going to change careers 6 times in their lives, and 3 of those careers don't even exist today. So you need to be helping people develop the skills they're going to need for tomorrow. And lastly, you need empowerment processes so that people can feel they have the ability to make decisions. You don't want your sales team having to run home to the home office and get approval every time they need to make a decision. And throughout the organization, people need to be able to make decisions. That's part of a great culture. Now, why do most small companies never grow? Well, what Jack says, and this is what I started to mention, number one is because the CEO is the sales manager, and candidly, the CEO is not good at the role of being a sales manager. Number 2, the best salesperson becomes the sales manager. And then what happens is you get a mediocre sales manager and you lose your top salesperson. Or your best salesperson is put into a role where they have to manage and sell, and that creates a conflict of interest. And what Jack's focus was, he said, growth comes from sales, period. And an organization has to be built around finding ways to drive sales growth, finding ways to build salespeople. And he said the sales manager's job is to create great salespeople, period. The CEO's job is to put the right person in charge of sales management. So that's a quick overview. Jack, in one of the breakouts, also had some more advice that we'll follow up on in just a minute. But we are going to switch gears now from our 3 keynotes and talk about some of the sessions that we went to. And we're going to start with the day 1 networking roundtables.
Thanks, David. The first roundtable that I sat in on was about mobile websites. And it's something that I'm passionate about. More people are using mobile devices to access information. 2 years ago, we saw mobile website traffic, specifically in the staffing industry, hover maybe around 4 to 6% of total traffic. Just in a year, that skyrocketed to 10 to 20% of overall traffic is now coming from mobile devices. So what that means is that you need to pay closer attention to how your presence looks on a mobile website. Go out and pick up your smartphone, go to your site. If it doesn't look good, if it's not easy to navigate, if you can't read information, you need to think about investing in a mobile version of your site. You don't necessarily need a native mobile app, and there are a lot of those questions. Well, should I create an app? Candidly, you don't need an app, and who is really going to download an app from a staffing agency? Maybe somebody that's looking for a job. Once they're placed, that app is gone off their phone. And apps are extremely, extremely expensive to create and maintain. So a better option is creating a mobile-friendly website or a mobile version of your website, much less cost-effective and more valuable to clients and candidates. And the last point that I want to highlight here is look at your job application. Not only look at your site, but look at how applicants are going to come to your site on their mobile device and apply. Right now, most of you have very long job application forms, and no one is going to sit there and type into their phone a job application. You need to look at ways to streamline your application. And I'll give you a good example. One thing that we've just done on our job board, the Haley Marketing job board, is added a apply with LinkedIn button. So if somebody comes on their phone, they can search for positions. They don't even have to type to apply. They can click apply with LinkedIn. Automatically pulls in their LinkedIn profile. Just some things to think about. If you don't do that, you're going to get a high exit rate on people coming to your site with a mobile device. And Ryan, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about inbound marketing.
Yes, thank you, Brad. So at this roundtable, we heard some good information and some misinformation, but I want to share the good here. Ever since Google's Panda and Penguin updates over the last couple of years, there's no question that blogging fresh, relevant content on a regular basis is by far the most effective way to deliver ongoing search engine optimization, which means you're ranking highly on Google and the other major search engines for the keywords that your prospective clients and candidates are searching for, and that's what's going to drive the inbound marketing. For this, content is really the critical component of most successful marketing strategies, whether it's email marketing, blogging, social sharing on LinkedIn groups or commenting on forums, the value of the content you share is directly correlated with the results you can expect. So one of the ideas we heard floated out there was, well, you really just want to blog to get those keywords out, but you've heard the saying garbage in, garbage out. It's kind of the reverse this time when we're talking about inbound marketing. If you put garbage out, you'll get garbage in, and you want to always be positioning yourself as the experts in your field with great content. There are, of course, pay-to-play approaches that staffing firms should consider as part of their strategy. You can pay-per-click for keywords on Google or even target Facebook users by their email addresses with PPC advertising. And you may have seen Google remarketing in action if you aren't familiar with the term. Say you visited a hotel website like Hilton.com, and all of a sudden you see Hilton popping up on banner ads when you visit unrelated sites. Staffing firms can use Google remarketing to stay top of mind the same way by paying to target a specific audience based on their activity on Google.
Great, thanks, Ryan. All right, and now going to some of the breakout sessions, and one that I went to, I was very interested in recruitment process outsourcing and what it takes to succeed, and there was a panel of people who work for RPO firms talking to the staffing industry. For those of you who are not familiar with RPO, it is essentially the process of outsourcing the function of direct hire for an employer. Usually you're working as part of the employer's organization. You as the RPO firm are transparent in the process. And that's one of the big differences is the people on the panel said a lot of staffing firms go into RPO thinking it's bulk direct hire, but it's not bulk direct hire. The services for RPO can be any part of the recruiting process: sourcing, screening, being responsible for the complete hire, onboarding, even coming up with employer branding are part of RPO services. Contracts are typically very long-term, running multiple years, and the pricing for RPO is very typically done on a cost-per-hire basis, but not with a success fee like you see in direct placement, but where there's just a flat fee per person hired. And the companies come up with pricing by figuring out their total costs, adding in a markup, and dividing it by the number of people the employer needs to hire. The employer then has to guarantee certain minimum volume each month to the RPO firm. Now, why do customers outsource? If you're thinking about, hey, maybe RPO is an opportunity for our firm, these are some of the value propositions. Companies outsource because they don't have internal recruiting competency, maybe for specific types of positions, or maybe as a whole they're just not that good at it. Maybe they have a very small HR department and they don't have a robust recruiting function. Every business, particularly larger employers, are under pressure to cut costs and improve quality, and as an outsourced provider, an RPO firm can very often bring greater efficiencies to the hiring process than the direct employer can themselves. Those efficiencies get passed on to the employer in terms of a lower cost of recruiting. And then the other thing is, by outsourcing to a third party, the employer can increase accountability in the recruiting process because you're going to probably have to sign service level agreements in terms of response times, number of candidates, quality of candidates to the employer, giving them almost a guarantee that they're going to fulfill their recruiting needs more effectively and efficiently than they were getting it done in-house, where they really couldn't measure it very effectively themselves.
All right. One of the sessions that I attended was 20 underappreciated business opportunities, and this was held by John Osborne, the VP of Research over at SIA, and it's always one of my favorite sessions. He did this last year too. I'm not going to go through all 20, but I'll highlight some of the keys here. Number one, the energy sector. North Dakota and Texas are in particular have big growth in these areas. And I talked to one staffing firm that's actually a commercial staffing firm. They don't do any engineers or drilling professionals. But their strategy was to follow drilling exploration in these areas and establish micro branches in these different sectors, because they can support the people that these drilling companies and oil companies need. And it's proven to be valuable for them. Another sector that's growing is manufacturing. We've seen the first gains in U.S. manufacturing since 1998. And really what's fueling that is the housing sector is up, energy costs are lower, and we've seen wages in other countries increasingly going up, which means manufacturing is now shifting back to the U.S. And as David pointed out earlier, by 2018, we're expecting light industrial and IT to make up over 50% of the staffing business, so there's huge opportunity in manufacturing. Another underserved market is education. Schools have been faced with big budget cuts. Temp use in schools is up 57%, so big opportunity there. We hinted earlier about online staffing. That was a big theme this year. And automated platforms, the human cloud, they're at $1 billion in sales right now and growing at 60% year over year. You need to pay attention and look at some of the lessons and take a look at what you can learn from these platforms. There's even companies out there that can help you white label a platform so that you can look at this model in your market. Another high growth area, home health care. We've seen 53% annual growth there, and it's really fueled by personal care aides and home health aides. Disability staffing, this is something that surprised me. There's large buyers out there that were asking SIA for lists of disabled people that they can hire to meet corporate initiatives. And they're having a very hard time finding a staffing and recruiting partner that can help recruit in this area. Big opportunity there. And last but not least, tax credits. There's work opportunity tax credit for placing people in high unemployment areas. Now, most of these high unemployment areas are also low markup areas. But it can be a big benefit on the tax credit side. So don't neglect this. There's some nice opportunity for profit there. All right, and the next session I attended was the Hire Technology, a New Era in Staffing. And this was held by Eric Gilpin from CareerBuilder. And he reiterated something we heard at the roundtable. Mobile traffic is very important. 25% of the traffic coming to CareerBuilder was from mobile devices, yet only 10% of applications were there. So think about your application, think and walk through it, make sure that it's mobile friendly, make sure that people can easily apply for positions. Next, talked a lot about the phrase big data. And really what this means is using data to help predict behavior. And he shared a great example of Target being able to predict pregnancy. So they're able to know within their customer base who's pregnant before that woman tells anyone. And they do this by looking at the different vitamins and the different supplements that you buy. When you swipe your card, they track all that information, and then they begin marketing to you. So that's the lesson for staffing companies really is how can you use big data, how can you use analytics in your organization to predict things like employee turnover. The large Fortune 500 companies are now doing that. They're trying to predict employee turnover so they can begin recruiting proactively. And something as simple as knowing when your top talent is coming off assignment, especially in the IT and engineering space, can go a long way. If you know somebody's coming off assignment in 2 months, you better be out there finding them a new contract because you can bet for sure that your competitor is out there approaching them with other contracts. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight was a survey that Eric went through. And the good thing here is that companies are hiring. 26% of companies they surveyed were hiring full-time. But more importantly, 40% were looking to increase temp help. And that's the highest percentage they've seen ever. So great opportunity for everyone on this call. Their biggest challenge, hiring managers' biggest challenge, is that they can't find the skills needed for the positions. And Eric mentioned that we're now graduating less IT professionals in the U.S. than we were in 2001. But jobs have grown. So we need to do a better job of educating the young workforce about upcoming skills. I know that can be hard to do, but a great example that they shared was what Randstad is doing. And I have a link here in our next bullet to a campaign that Randstad put together. It's called Inspiring Experts. And what they did is had their current employees who are engineers, they were trying to get them to promote to younger people the virtues and the benefit of becoming an engineer. And it's a great campaign. Take a look at it and see what you can learn from it. All right, the next session that I went to was about online staffing. And we mentioned it a few times today. But the founder, Fabio Rosati of Elance, gave an amazing session. And he was really forthcoming about his business model and what's being done over at Elance. And what Elance is a human cloud. It's an automated online platform for talent that allows employers to go into the database, find somebody that fits the skills that they're looking for, and hire them directly. And what's interesting about this is that it's extremely fast. Some positions are filled within hours of people being placed. The average time to fill a position is 3 days. Compare that against your average time to hire. we talked a little bit earlier about service and providing great service. Well, Elance provides great service, and the interesting thing is that there's no personal relationship there. They don't really talk to many clients, but they provide amazing service because they're providing high value. Remember, good service isn't about personal relationships necessarily. It's about providing value, and Elance is doing it, and it's resulted in 80% repeat clients. And one interesting thing about Elance is that they're looking at serving an underserved talent market. So we talked a lot about underserved employer markets, but let's flip the table here and talk about the talent market. A third of their Elancers are full-time independent contractors, only a third. A third are full-time employees that want to make extra money. Think about this. Have you ever considered targeting full-time employees? Probably not, because they already have a job, but there are a lot of full-time employees out there that want extra money, and they're turning to Elance to make that. And then a third are students and retirees. So there's great opportunity in those sectors. For staffing firms, what I would encourage you to do is take a look at your excess inventory. Are there people you have in placed? What are you doing with those people? Look at sending out automated messages. Look at creating a model that's a little bit more efficient so that you can place more of those people that you haven't placed already. A good place to start is looking at sites like Elance for ideas.
Thanks, Brad. And continuing on the points you just shared there, whereas VMS and MSP models are now mature, online staffing is clearly a maturing model. There's about 50 online staffing firms servicing this space. In the presentation I attended, Jeffrey Leventhal, CEO of WorkMarket, they've got over 200 companies using their online staffing software with 30,000 assignments in progress. And in 2012, online staffing grew to $1 billion in global gross revenue. It's growing 40% year over year with a forecast to hit $5 billion by 2018. And the relationship, it's direct between work user and work provider. The level of work is typically a project or a task. And a couple of interesting stats were shared here. Harvard Business Review stated that the rate of growth in contingent workers will be 3 to 4 times the growth rate among traditional workforces, and they're eventually going to make up about 25% of the workforce. And CNN Money, they wrote that freelance professionals now make up more than a quarter of the U.S. working population. So we go to the next slide and talk about flexible work. That's defined by flexibility around how work is done and when it's done. And also in the session, it was Chirag Mehta from NextCrew. They offer a white label online staffing solution for staffing firms. He shared the forces driving this trend toward flexible work. Number one, workers want flexibility. Number two, the challenging economy is requiring many to pursue multiple income streams. And third, the vast amount of information that's now available for individuals. And the fourth is really the technology that's available. So the key takeaways from the staffing companies can take advantage of this trend by allowing clients to directly search for screen talent in their talent pool. They can create self-managed portals for both employees and for clients. You can imagine, employees managing their own profile and clients posting their own jobs. And that might seem very alien to some now, but that is where things are trending, and there's great opportunity there. And third, streamlining workforce management and communication. And what that means is direct management of the contingent workforce, allowing clients to create their own job order. And some of the fields that lend themselves well to this model include event management, catering, day labor, but essentially any type of temporary staffing could be considered for this. And then the next session, top creative ways to increase your bottom line. Some great examples shared here, but I know we're short on time, so I'm going to have to kind of graze on these. One, Amy Bingham, top creative way to boost direct hire sales. Have every customer-facing rep call and directly market top talent. It's that simple, but that is a very effective way to boost direct hire sales. Key to growth from Jeff Harris. Put profitability front and center. Jeff, by doing this, when he focused just on profitability as the key metric, instead of all those other underlying KPIs, that grew his firm by 300%. creating a brand with authentic differentiation. Scott Winthrop gave some great advice here, and I couldn't agree with more. Staffing firms too often brand what they do and the methodology. That does not differentiate you. You need to focus on what it means for your clients. Focus on the results. And you can differentiate by saying something like, our customers tell us we deliver 3 times faster than our competitors. That begs the question, how? And that becomes the opportunity to share the methodology, not beforehand. Miles Hunt shared the focus on external KPIs and why that's important. With the growth that we're seeing in the numbers David shared across the market, focusing on internal numbers can mask your underperformance as the rising tide lifts all ships. But by measuring yourself against your competition, you'll have a more accurate measure of relative success in both good markets and bad. And lastly, Scott Winthrop, setting quotas, just quickly, number 1, identify quotas for average and above average reps. 2, track that for 3 months, either look back 3 if you've got it or track 3 months going forward if you don't. Utilize the results to set metrics, and do that twice a year so you can adjust for trends and changes in the marketplace. David, back to you.
All right, thanks, Ryan. And guys, thank you very much for the overview of all those sessions. And for everybody on today's call, you can kind of see why at the beginning I was saying it was a little bit overwhelming. We just covered less than a third, I think, of all of the sessions that were there, and scratched the surface of the great information that was shared. And we want to wrap up today's call. Each of us put together a list of lessons that we learned from this year's executive forum. So I'll kick the ball off, guys, and then we'll kind of go round robin till we get through our lessons learned. My first lesson, and it came from the first session, is that the Affordable Care Act, it could be a boon to the industry, but you have to plan now. And you need to calculate the impact and know how you're going to respond. Is it going to be play or is it going to be pay? You need to determine the impact on your costs and how much you're going to try to pass on to your clients, and if possible, start to get those contracts in place now. And then you have to look for ways to use this massive change in legislation to drive revenue growth by focusing on new segments of the market, by finding new ways to service your clients, by finding ways to further help simplify the management of the staffing function. Brad.
Lesson 2, get serious about mobile. We mentioned it a few times, but pull out your iPhone, pull out your Android phone, and look at what your site looks like, and ask yourself, would you come back to this? Does it offer any value? Also, look at your application, streamline it for mobile devices, look at what questions you can remove, or look at doing things like the Apply with LinkedIn button to make it easy for candidates to do business with you. And lastly, you don't need a native app. Okay, don't look at investing thousands of dollars in a native app. Just make sure that you have a great mobile website.
Ryan. Okay, so between Jeff Harris sharing how his focus on profitability grew his firm 300%, and Jack Daly really hammering home the importance of sales process and sales management in the keynote, really struck me how dramatic the change in focus and strategy has to be for a staffing firm to achieve major growth. And almost all firms start out with the CEO assuming full sales responsibility. In the early stages of growth, it's likely that additional sales resources might report directly to the CEO as you're running mean and lean. But all firms that are focused on major growth are going to reach a point where the critical role of sales management can't be accomplished effectively by the CEO, and they have to avoid the temptation of promoting their top producer to that role, since what makes a sales manager successful has little to do with what makes a salesperson succeed. So as David mentioned, sales management is about growing salespeople, not sales. And if 80% of a sales manager's time needs to be focused on coaching and developing the people, the bottleneck of a CEO or a salesperson wearing that hat becomes obvious. A sales manager cannot be spending their time developing company strategy or closing deals. They need to be engaged with their reps in a meaningful way to make them consistently better at executing the process. So I highly recommend Jack Daly's advice there.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, I'm back up. Staffing firms need to find new ways to deliver value. And what I mean by that is the traditional staffing marketplace is being commoditized more than ever, and the more consolidation we see in the staffing industry over the next 5 years, the more commodity pressures we're going to feel. So we need to either get more niche focused or and/or move up the value chain to being responsible for a higher level of result than just providing people by the hour, by either taking responsibility for projects, outsourcing, managing more aspects of the staffing function, even for smaller businesses. We've had VMS, we've had on-sites for years with larger users of staffing. Well, there are ways to provide that same value to smaller companies, not necessarily by being on-site, but by taking over the responsibility for managing the staffing function so that you're delivering a greater level of value and therefore can create and command higher margins. All right, Brad.
Lesson 5, serve the underserved, and this is both on the employer side and the talent side. There's some great opportunities that exist in niche markets. We mentioned a few earlier in the presentation from John Osborne, and I suggest looking at purchasing those CDs. Great session. Look at schools, look at disabled. One area that came up which surprised me again was translators. One of the hottest occupations over the last 3 years has been translators. They've grown 69%. Now, I'm not saying go out and get in the translator recruiting business, but think about other areas of high growth that are very specific. If you can find a niche that you do very well, it's easier to differentiate your services, and it leads to higher margin solutions.
Thanks, Brad. And Ryan.
Okay, so branding is bragging. It's a big takeaway I got from Scott Wintrip's lesson on how to differentiate yourself and build your brand with actual results, not your methodology. And maybe boasting's a better word, but branding is really all about educating your audience on the difference you make and why they should care. Everyone says they have great people and great service, literally everyone. But staffing firms often, they share their unique process or methodology, and while that can be great information, it's not the best way to establish your brand. The prospect will ask you how you do it once you've captured their interest with the results you deliver. So, by positioning those unique values your services have, you're not just enabling your salespeople to have great first conversations, you're defending yourself against commoditization. You define the value you deliver, and it keeps you in the driver's seat for defining the cost, and never assume your clients really understand the value of your services. You have to teach them when, why, and how to best use staffing. You'll differentiate your firm and create more sales opportunities.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, my next take-home was grow your business, don't run your business. And you grow a company faster by developing people than by closing sales. And for most small business owners, that's sometimes hard to get into your heads. I do the same thing. You want to spend the time talking to the customers. You're the best salesperson the organization has, but you're the hardest person to clone. So if you can develop the people in your organization to be more effective at their jobs, making sure you take the time to train, getting out in the field with your people, not to do the work, but to provide the coaching, you will grow much faster. And the last comment that I loved from Jack Daly was, if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. So he was recommending to all executives to invest in some clerical temporary help and get the support needed so that you can be growing your business and not working in your business. Brad.
Okay, and my last takeaway was learn from the human cloud. There's quite a few lessons to be learned from online staffing firms. So take a look at sites like Elance. So look at their efficiencies. While there's no real personal relationship that they have with their clients are extremely pleased. So look at how you can provide great service. It's about providing value. Elance provides value even though there's no personal relationships. They've built great efficiencies. They offer a great model. The technology supports that model, and clients are happy.
RPO is not for everyone. That was a big takeaway. And when you look at the definition, if you're not outsourcing one of the recruiting services like interviewing, scheduling, onboarding, you're not providing RPO services. It is by definition an exclusive relationship. All the recruiting is done under the client's brand, not the staffing firms. And as David mentioned earlier, if you aren't interested in making a distinct investment in a dedicated RPO model, it's best to partner with an RPO service provider instead of trying to create what they were calling an RPO light solution as a one-off. The partnership opportunities do abound because the pure play RPOs are focused on transformation, implementation, change management. They're not focused on the staffing element that you should be an expert at. And by partnering with the RPO service providers, the staffing firm not only protects themselves from fail errors, but they get to reap rewards of large direct hire opportunities that they might otherwise miss.
All right, and finally, to wrap things up, the last lesson learned, make sure your people know what drives profits. Brad mentioned earlier the Southwest message of Wheels Up, and when the CEO of Southwest talked to his people and said, what really drives the profitability of our airline, it came down to these two words, wheels up. When a plane's in the air, they're making money. When it's on the ground, they're not, which is why they turn planes faster than anybody else and why they're one of the most successful, most profitable airlines out there. You need to make sure you understand the fundamental drivers of revenue, profitable revenue in your business, and that each person in your organization knows their role in impacting the bottom line and where to focus. And if you do that, if your people know what drives profits and you're helping them to perform at their peak level by being a coach and not a doer, you are going to have a very successful, very high growth staffing organization. And that brings us to the end of our 2013 Executive Forum recap. Again, if you want more information on these, go to staffingindustry.com. Check with them about purchasing the recordings from the sessions. It was a phenomenal executive forum, and if you can make the time and get away to San Diego next March, that's where they're holding the 2014 executive forum. But you don't have to wait that long for some more great webinar advice. Our next webinar is coming up in just a few weeks on Thursday, April the 11th. And we're going to tackle a topic that I have seen a ton of misinformation about, search engine optimization. I've seen some really, really horrifically bad advice being given to staffing company owners about how to improve their search results on Google and Yahoo and Bing. And Brad and his team, our social media and SEO team, are going to run a webinar where they're going to show you what it really takes to get great search results in 8 easy steps. So that is April the 11th, and you can go to lunchwithhaley.com to reserve a seat. From all of us, thank you very much for being part of today's webinar. And as you're signing off, please do fill out the survey and share some feedback so we know how we did, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.